Hi, I'm Helen, a 29-year-old newlywed, and my husband, Bobby, is 31 and works in an office. Our story took an unexpected turn when, without any prior discussion, Bobby decided to have his younger sister, Doris, move in with us. We had just bought a $500,000 home, one that we had specially designed as newlyweds. From the moment we got engaged, Bobby and I had been deeply involved in every detail of the house's design and furnishings, excited to finally settle in together after our wedding. But when we moved in, I was taken aback by the sheer amount of Bobby's things filling our space. "Bobby, is all this stuff really necessary?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed. Without missing a beat, he dropped a bombshell. "Oh, did I not tell you? Doris is moving in with us." I was completely blindsided. "Why would Doris move in now? We just got married," I asked, feeling frustrated and hurt by the lack of communication. Bobby waved off my concerns, saying, "It's no big deal. Doris is family, and it's just a temporary arrangement. She wants to stay in the new house." I protested, pointing out that this hadn't been discussed beforehand, but Bobby ignored me, continuing to unpack. Then, in a more agitated tone, he snapped, "If you have a problem with it, you can leave. Doris is staying, so stop complaining." I was stunned by his response and threatened to call my brother for backup. Bobby quickly backpedaled. "Wait, don't call him. Look, Doris won't be here forever. She just needs a place to stay until she finds a job and her own place. Can you understand that?" I was still upset, but reluctantly agreed, suggesting, "Fine, but can Doris stay in the guest room?" Bobby hesitated and mumbled, Yeah," though his discomfort was clear. After a chaotic day of unpacking, we managed to get Doris settled into the guest room, and Bobby and I tried to enjoy a quiet toast to our new home. Just as we were unwinding, the doorbell rang late at night. Bobby rushed to answer it, and to my surprise, Doris was at the door. As I stood in the kitchen, in my pajamas and clearly not in the mood for visitors, Bobby called out, "Hey, Helen, Doris is here." I forced a smile and greeted her. "Welcome, Doris. What's going on so late?" With a bold grin, Doris responded, "Can't I come home whenever I want? Show me my big, spacious room, bro." She followed Bobby to the guest room but immediately began complaining. "This isn't what you promised. You said it was bigger." She stormed upstairs, searching for another room. I followed them, only to find Doris in my designated workroom, declaring, "This should be my room." I couldn't hold back my frustration. "This is my workroom. You can't take it," I snapped. Bobby, ever the peacemaker, interrupted. "Why not? Just make this Doris's room." The situation was spiraling out of control, and I could feel the very foundation of our marriage being challenged. I stood my ground. "No way." I tried to find a compromise, suggesting that Doris move into the room next door, the one that Bobby had designated as his workspace. It was spacious and would give her enough room. I motioned toward it, but Bobby immediately reacted with distress. "Not that room. I've been looking forward to using it. I even picked out the wallpaper myself." "No way," I replied, my patience running thin. The only other option seemed to be the future children's room, which we were using as a guest room. Doris, still dissatisfied, snapped at me, "You're really something, aren't you? Not listening to the head of the household. Pretty cheeky for someone who relies on him for meals." Her words stung, and I couldn't help but think to myself, who's the real freeloader here? Exhausted and emotionally drained, I retreated to the living room, hoping to enjoy some quiet alone time. I could hear them arguing in the background, but I ignored it until Bobby came storming in. "You're always opposing me, acting all high and mighty," he yelled, grabbing the wine bottle and taking a swig. "If you can't listen to me, then get out." I'm the head of this household, and you're underestimating me. He stormed off, Doris following closely behind. Feeling overwhelmed, I decided to call my brother. He answered quickly, though he sounded upset. Are you mad, bro? Were you sleeping? Sorry, I asked, realizing I had called during an argument with his wife. He laughed bitterly. What's up? Did the move go smoothly? I'm sorry I couldn't be there. You're all set, right? Is everything okay with your wife? I guess you don't just leave her hanging, huh? As I explained the situation, Doris moving in without prior discussion, rejecting the guest room, and the way Bobby and Doris were treating me, my brother was concerned. It sounds like they're treating you like a servant, he said, his tone serious. I laughed it off, trying to mask my frustration. I'm your sister, right? A servant? If they think they can pull that off, let them try. He chuckled lightly but added, good point. But if anything goes wrong, call me. Our conversation shifted when he revealed something shocking. His wife had been seeing other men she met on a dating site and was having an affair. He discovered it when she accidentally sent him a message meant for her lover. Bobby had suspected something for a while, and after getting confirmation, he confronted her, took her phone, and sent her to her parents' house. He planned to visit her parents the next day to sort things out. We agreed to keep in touch and support each other through our struggles. After hanging up, I focused on unpacking the remaining boxes, waiting for Bobby and Doris to return. When they finally did, they were drunk and in high spirits. As I continued sorting through the boxes, they approached me with what they thought was a brilliant idea. Let's move our bedroom to Doris's, and we'll each sleep in our workrooms. What do you think? It's a good plan, right? Just clear out the room for Doris by tomorrow. I paused before responding. There's something I need to clarify first. How much will Doris contribute to groceries and household expenses each month? And she's not planning on staying here forever, right? So, how long does she intend to stay? Bobby looked uneasy at my questions. You want money from Doris, who doesn't have a job. Don't worry, I'll cover it with my salary, he muttered. Doris chimed in, her tone entitled. I'll stay until I'm happy. I can't stand my mom's old-fashioned cooking and all her nagging about laundry and cleaning. Here, I can do whatever I want without paying a dime. It's perfect. If you don't like it, Helen, why don't you move out? That was the last straw. Fine. Let's divide the household expenses. I'll cover my share with my income, and you can use your salary to support yourself and Doris. They seemed oddly pleased with this arrangement. And don't forget, I added, you'll need to take care of your own chores. Still feeling like they weren't taking me seriously, I wrote out our agreement and left it for them. The next day, still worried about my brother, I visited him at his office. He had recently taken over as the president of a construction company after our father's passing. He was surprised to see me but invited me to speak first. I explained my situation at home and asked if there might be an opening for me at his company. Our secretary is leaving due to her husband's relocation. The timing is perfect, he said, agreeing to hire me. Then, he shared some devastating news. His wife was pregnant, but it was clear that the child wasn't his. He'd found messages, photos, and videos on her phone, evidence of her affair with other men. When I asked if he was considering divorce, he said, "It's going to be tough on the kids, but I don't see any other option." I suggested he consult with a lawyer for advice. After our conversation, I couldn't stop thinking about my brother's situation and the shocking betrayal by his wife. I had always seen her as a warm, family-oriented person, and now, learning of her affair, it felt like losing a close friend. Tears welled up as I processed everything. Amid my thoughts, Doris knocked at my door. "Hey," she said, interrupting my moment of reflection. 2. Doris's voice cut through my thoughts as I was trying to process everything. I'm hungry. Can you make something? She called from the other side of the door. I didn't answer. I was too emotionally drained to even respond. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my brother. It was about the lawyer meeting tomorrow. I sent back an okay sticker, barely able to keep my eyes open. Before I knew it, I had drifted off into an exhausted sleep. But I was jolted awake by my husband's loud voice, cutting through the silence. You didn't even make food for Doris? And you're just lying there? He shouted. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I quietly held up the written agreement we had made. He saw it, his face falling as he processed what had been happening. He turned to Doris. Let's leave her be for today. She looks off. We'll talk about it tomorrow. I'm not sick, just tired of this, I muttered, rolling back over and trying to ignore the chaos around me. The next morning, I left the house without a word to Bobby, not even bothering to wake him. I drove straight to my brother's place. When I arrived, he looked like he hadn't slept in days, his eyes red and tired. Before anything else, I helped him get his kids ready and took them to kindergarten. On the way there, they chattered innocently, sharing how their mom had left after another argument. Mommy was the bad one. She went out and left us. We cried and cried. They told me, their voices filled with the usual childlike honesty. I reassured them, if you're lonely, you can always call Auntie, okay? Their cheerful yay made it clear they weren't as upset as their dad was. After dropping off the kids, my brother and I went to the lawyer. The lawyer confirmed that my sister-in-law's phone contained more than enough evidence for a divorce case, including photos, videos, and texts of her affairs. My brother seemed defeated but relieved to know he had solid ground to stand on. He shared his side of the story, and when it was my turn, I explained the ongoing issues at home. The lawyer gave me some practical advice on how to handle things, and after the meeting, my brother dropped me back home. We'll be discussing the divorce soon. If you need anything, don't hesitate to call, he said before leaving. As I stepped into the house, I was met with the sight of chaos. The kitchen was a mess, greasy countertops, dirty dishes piled high. They had tried to make breakfast, but all it did was leave more work for me. I stood there, staring at the disaster, unsure whether I should clean it or confront them about it. Just then, Doris appeared, her voice sharp. Where were you? You didn't make breakfast. Bobby had to go to work hungry. This is unacceptable, she snapped. I took a deep breath before responding firmly. I'm not your maid. Didn't you learn how to clean up after yourself? She didn't seem to care, but I wasn't going to let her drag me into another argument. But you're the wife, Doris insisted, following me as I walked to my room. When I opened the door, I was stunned. My room had been completely rearranged, and Doris's things had taken over. Did you go into my room? I asked, my voice rising. What's going on? Doris grinned, her tone smug. Oh, I love your room. It's cute and neat, just like me. I moved your things into the guest room. Don't you think it's perfect for me? I rushed to the guest room, my frustration growing. My computer and personal items had been tossed aside carelessly. The disrespect was unbearable. I stormed back to the living room, filled with rage, ready to confront Bobby. When he returned home later that day, I knew the situation had reached its breaking point. Doris was grinning by his side, and Bobby's face was clouded with anger. He accused me. You're going against Doris. Aren't you my wife? Isn't it your job to take care of me and your sister-in-law? In that moment, the last remnants of affection I had for Bobby vanished. He stood there, silent as Doris invaded my personal space, not once defending me or asking her to respect our boundaries. No, he was more concerned about appeasing Doris. I was done. If this is how it's going to be, I'm inviting my brother over. He's never seen our house, Maybe it's time he sees what's really going on here. The anger in me was uncontainable. This had gone far enough, and I wasn't going to let them treat me like this anymore. Bobby and Doris were still smug when my family arrived, but the sight of my brothers immediately shifted the energy in the room. Doris's confident demeanor faltered, and she paled, clearly recognizing the shift in power. "Oh, Doris, I thought you were going to kick out my family," I said, my voice steady but laced with sarcasm. She didn't answer, just weakly shook her head. Bobby, too, looked less sure of himself now. My brother, towering over 6 feet tall with his buzz cut and muscular frame, made his presence known. He wasn't just intimidating in stature. His years as a judo competitor and coach made it clear that he could handle himself if needed. My younger brother, equally formidable, mirrored his appearance. The two of them had been unforgettable figures at my wedding, and they were now a solid, unshakable force in my corner. My elder brother laughed, his voice booming with amusement. "Huh, you're going to kick us out? Isn't it you guys who should be leaving?" he teased, directing his words at Bobby and Doris. Doris, still trying to salvage her bravado, shot back, "Yeah, my brother is divorcing his useless wife. Now please leave." My younger brother immediately retorted, "What? You guys are the ones leaving, aren't you? This is Helen's house, isn't it? It was built with her share of our father's inheritance and is in her name." As the confrontation continued, my mother, who had been tidying up the kitchen, called out, "Oh dear, what a mess." She then added, with a casual air, "Don't drag out the conversation. Get to the point already." Taking the cue, my brothers directed their focus. "We have 2 matters to discuss today," my elder brother said firmly, his voice brokering no argument. With that, Doris and Bobby were told to sit down, and the real conversation was about to begin. The tension in the room was palpable, and as my family prepared to address the issues at hand, I could feel a sense of relief wash over me. My family had always been there for me, and this moment marked the beginning of taking control of my life again. I had reached a breaking point, and I wasn't going to let Bobby and Doris dictate the terms of my existence any longer. Now it was time for them to hear the full truth, and for me to make it clear that I wouldn't back down. As my brother dealt with the devastation of his wife's betrayal, the atmosphere in the room shifted. There was a heavy weight in the air, and my attention turned back to Bobby and Doris. Both of them had been so smug just moments earlier, but now, seeing the reality of what they were up against, they seemed lost. My brother's firm handling of the situation left no room for argument. Doris, who had tried to defend her position with threats and bravado, was now in full retreat, scrambling to pack up and leave. The tension was palpable, but it was clear that both Bobby and Doris were caught in a web of lies they hadn't anticipated, and their once confident demeanor had completely unraveled. Bobby, still trying to make sense of everything, faltered in his defense. "But I'm married to Helen, right? I can't just leave. I won't separate." His voice trembled as he spoke, his previous arrogance now replaced by uncertainty. The doorbell rang, breaking the silence, and when I opened the door to see my sister-in-law standing there, tears streaming down her face, everything clicked into place. Bobby, realizing who she was, went into full denial mode. His confusion was evident as he stammered, "How did you find out where we live? Please just go home for today." But my brother wasn't having it. His voice was laced with disdain as he addressed Bobby. "Did you forget my wife's face?" He turned to Bobby with a sharp glare. "This is the second matter we need to discuss." As the tension mounted, my elder brother produced the evidence of Bobby's affair with his wife, showing Bobby that he'd been caught. The air seemed to freeze as Bobby's face drained of color. "You mean she?" His panic was palpable, but it was too late. The truth had already been laid bare. "Seems like my wife is pregnant with your child." my brother stated flatly. He threw the evidence on the table, and with cold finality, he declared, "For me, it's divorce, nothing less." Doris, hearing this, seemed to realize the magnitude of the situation. Fear clouded her face, and in a desperate attempt to avoid being dragged further into the mess, she blurted out, "I will pack my things and go back to my parents' house." She made an attempt to flee, but my younger brother stepped in. "We've got a truck loaded with boxes. Start packing your things now. I'll get the boxes." Doris hesitated, but, under my brother's stern gaze, she finally relented and started packing. Meanwhile, my elder brother handed his wife the divorce papers, along with a pen. His words were firm, and there was no room for negotiation. "Sign the divorce papers," he commanded. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at the papers, but she knew there was no way out. My brother's voice remained resolute as he spoke. "That's what the kids want. Your opinion doesn't matter." His tone was unwavering, and with a sob, she signed the papers. "Next time, take care of the child in your belly. I won't ask for child support, but don't ever show your face to my kids unless they want to see you. I won't stop them when they grow up," he added, his words harsh but clear. As my sister-in-law knelt, apologizing with tears in her eyes, I couldn't help but feel the weight of what had just transpired. My brother had been living with the pain of this betrayal for too long, and now, in this moment of clarity, it was all unraveling. It was a difficult, emotional scene, but it was also a reminder of how far people would go to protect what they loved, their family, their integrity. In the midst of all this, the attention shifted back to me, with my family now standing firm and the lies exposed. It was my turn to address the mess that had become my life with Bobby and Doris, and as I looked around, I knew that the decision to confront everything head-on was the right one. The chaos, the pain, the uncertainty, it was all a part of clearing the path for what would come next. As the dust settled and the chaos of the past few days came to an end, I could finally feel a sense of relief starting to creep in. The decision to go through with the divorce, despite Bobby's pleas, had been the right one. It was clear that his remorse came too late, and no amount of apologies or desperate cries could undo the damage he had caused. When my brother handed me the divorce papers and urged me to have Bobby sign them, I knew that my path was clear. I directed Bobby to sign without hesitation, fully aware that this was the only way to take control of my life again. His reluctance was obvious, but in the end, he had no choice but to comply. The additional pledge documents my lawyer had prepared, requiring Bobby and Doris to compensate me for the damages they had caused and promising never to return to my house, further solidified the finality of our separation. Watching Bobby's shoulders slump as he trudged upstairs to pack his belongings was a moment of closure. The man who once thought he could manipulate the situation was now just a shell of the person he used to be, unable to escape the consequences of his actions. My brother's ironic comment about getting a marriage license for Bobby and Doris only added a bitter layer of humor to the situation. It was clear that Bobby had hoped to escape responsibility, but he was trapped in a web of his own making. As my brother handed the marriage license to his wife and told Bobby to sign it, there was no escaping the magnitude of his betrayal. His tears and muttered words of surrender reflected the hopelessness of his situation. There was no running away from the mess he had created. Once everything was packed and loaded onto the truck, my family and I could finally breathe a sigh of relief. The house, once filled with tension and deceit, would now be the place where I could start over. My mother, always the peacemaker, suggested she sell her house and move in with my younger brother, while my older brother sold his home and planned to move in with his 4 children. Their idea of buying my house with the proceeds from their own homes was a generous offer, and though they teased me about building a new house for my next marriage, I firmly insisted, "I'm good with an apartment." With a sense of hope and excitement, we decided to get a dog, something the kids had always wanted. Despite the house's past and the memories it held, we were creating a new chapter, one filled with love, laughter, and the promise of happier days ahead. As for Bobby and Doris, their fate was sealed. 8 months later, Bobby married my former sister-in-law, and they moved in with his parents. The consequences of their actions were clear. Bobby was left to work tirelessly to pay for the damages they had caused to my house, while Doris, who had initially treated her new sister-in-law like a maid, pushed her to the brink of mental collapse. In a cruel twist of fate, Doris's own mother eventually kicked her out, and when she reached out to Bobby for help, he coldly blamed her for their downfall. The stark contrast between Doris's isolation and my new beginning with my family was not lost on me. While they were mired in their own mess, I was surrounded by the love and support of my family. We had come together, stronger than ever, and despite the painful past, we were building a life full of happiness and hope. Bobby and Doris had lost everything they had taken for granted, while I had gained a new sense of freedom, peace, and the unwavering support of my family. The contrast was a sharp reminder of how betrayal and deception could tear people apart, while love and loyalty could heal even the deepest wounds.